I'm author and critic David Agranoff. I'm a horror and science fiction author, critic, and researcher. In this podcast, I wanted to provide in-depth interviews and panel discussions with everyone from New York Times bestselling authors to researchers, musicians, and anyone I find interesting. Welcome to Postcards from a Dying World. Hello and welcome to a special episode of Postcards from a Dying World. We're going to keep it local in San Diego here a little bit today. But before I get into that, just really quickly, I want to remind everyone, I don't make shit off doing this podcast or most of the book reviews and things I spend a lot of time writing. So I've got a new link that I'm putting on these shows. It's a buy me a coffee link. I don't actually drink coffee, but you can buy me one, tea or whatever. They'll probably end up helping me buy Philip K. Dick research books, to be honest with you. So, but that link was a little weird, right? So just a note out there, the other way you can support my work is buying my books, which are starting to get out there a little bit more. So The Last Night to Kill Nazis. But we're here today to talk about another author, longtime homie and local San Diegan, Cody Goodfellow. Cody is a writer, close to my heart. He's a mad scientist, really. He's kind of the literary freakazoid combination of a whole bunch of dark and horror and bizarro influences meeting together with punk rock attitude and, a healthy, open attitude towards mind-altering genre and chemicals. So you may know Cody as the host of the Cthulhu Prayer Breakfasts. And hopefully we'll be seeing another one of those soon. At least I'm working on that. So Cody Goodfellow, welcome back to Postcards from a Dying World. We're excited to have you here to talk about your own work.
Thank you very much, David. I'm thrilled to be here.
Now, the last time you were here, we were talking about At the Mountains of Madness in the 1930s sci-fi series. And so a lot of people will know you from your Lovecraft influences. So we'll get into that at some point. But I definitely want to just touch upon a couple of the older works. But for anyone who's not familiar with you, maybe give them your origin story of how you got into genre fiction, reading and writing and that stuff. Because, we are introducing a few people to your work.
All right. Well, I was a very adept spinner of lies from a very early age. And I love giving people bad news. And I've been writing for money since just after college. And certainly Lovecraft and cosmic horror were an enormous influence on me. I discovered Lovecraft at age 12 at a Scholastic book fair. And
as one does.
Yeah, as one does. You either pick up that or What's Happening to Me, and all the people who just bought the normal book that explained puberty, in a straightforward way. They got all the good jobs, bastards. So and then Philip K. Dick came into my life just before college. Right at probably the right time for that, when I was no longer legally supervised and encouraged for the good of the state to consume mass quantities of psychoactive substances, and it seemed like a grounding, a wise hand on one shoulder going, it's cool, you're just ride the wave, buddy. But at the same time, I found these common threads between what Philip K. Dick was doing and what Lovecraft was, and there uh, finding their own but very in odd tangential ways, very similar ways of expressing the ineffable, of expressing that, of giving a name and a face to that horrible yawning void, which threatens any sort of sense of meaning that we might try to construct in the universe. And so those were guiding posts in my own journey from, consumer of nightmares to creator of nightmares. And so I tried to kind of synthesize those influences and a lot of other things, both that I love and that I figured readers would love in my first works, Radiant Dawn and Ravenous Dusk, which were kind of a modern weird tale, and that they took like the conspiracy thriller, police procedural, military, high concept action thriller, like the in the vein of like Tom Clancy and whatnot, and fed that into the wood chipper of cosmic horror. Um, and I've since moved on, and I've tried out a lot of different things, because if you light up a rocket and it just blows up on the launch pad, you're free to devise a completely different kind of rocket. And I've written a lot of different kinds of things, but uh, between cosmic horror and that kind of very transcendental sense of cosmic wonder that Dick was yearning for, are still like guiding posts in a lot of my work.
Well, and I should say, like, and I've been very clear, like, with my opinion of your work, and I have a very high opinion of everything that you were doing, even though, like, you might look back at Radiant Dawn as being the one that blew up on the launch pad. I think it's incredible,
Oh,
and
well,
it holds
no,
up.
I don't mean that I don't mean that it did poorly. I mean, given that it was a self-published book 24 years ago. So
Yeah,
the way before it became, cool, and then conversely uncool. Uh, uh but it was, I was having no luck with submitting my work through conventional channels, and I was getting frustrated, and I was about to give up and just can sell my soul for a position in mid-level retail management.
right.
And a good friend said, you've never gotten a book put out before. I've never published a book before, but I believe in what you're doing. And so I wrote Radiant Dawn with the sense that I want to write exactly the kind of book that I wish there was more of in the world, and exactly the kind of book that I would write without any constraints or anybody telling me what I ought to do or what market forces dictate. And in that sense, it was the most beautiful kind of failure, because it came out, and of course nobody noticed, because this guy's putting out a vanity project, who's going to care? And we submitted it for reviews and things, and nothing happened. And then slowly reviews started to come in, and they were like, I've never heard of this guy, I've never heard of this publisher, I had no reason to crack open this book, but I did, and I love it, and I want to know when the sequel's coming out. And there were just enough of those. That's the hell. If you
Yeah.
go out there and you do your thing, and everybody goes, boo, you suck, then you can happily go off and get a day job, right, and pursue a conventionally satisfying existence. But if just enough people are going, oh my god, that was amazing, where's the rest of it? It's, of course, enough that you could fit them into the back seat of your hatchback. But it's still
A little more than that.
well, yeah, okay,
Well,
maybe
and it
messy.
was John Skip's glowing review, a cyberpunk legend, John Skip's glowing review in Cemetery Dance was where I first heard of your work, and
Mm-hmm.
his review was very hyperbolic. And my first reaction was, well, now I got to read this because I got to see if this book is as good as the hyperbole. And and honestly, I believe it was. And one of the things that about Radiant Dawn, even 24 years later, is that there's a level of quality that and just weirdness and like nothing else you've ever read that kind of still stands out. And when I say that when I make the joke about Cody being a mad scientist, I kind of really believe that, because It's not just a joke. It's that you kind of synthesize all these kind of genres, styles, and influences into something that is a Cody Goodfellow book is very much its own thing. And one of the best things about when there's like 9 bazillion authors out there and everybody's self-publishing and doing all their thing, like how do you separate yourself? And I feel this way when I sit down to the computer to write, is that I need to try and write something that nobody else could write, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I love, and if I look at, and I just picked 3 examples here, but like I have Scum of the Earth and Un-America, and then Vertical, because we're going to be talking about it. These are 3 very different books, but they're very much of they're Cody, they're your style and they're you, and they're very much original. And one of the things I would say to people who might be listening to this interview, if they have not read you yet, is that one of the reasons why I love the alchemy that comes in the pages of your books is because they are very much a product of that nobody else could write, right? And that's one of the reasons why, like, I love John Shirley and Philip K. Dick, and like John Bruner, for example. I know nobody, or Ursula Le Guin. Nobody else can write these books, right? They're very much the work of those people. Now, before we move into, I did want to ask you about the reissue of Perfect Union, because what I consider to be your horror masterpiece, although I think Un-America is probably your best novel. Perfect Union is a prime example of what you were talking about. You weren't having luck submitting, and one of the reasons why, I think, is because, and I mean this in the most positive way, this is going to sound like a backhanded compliment, but your books are so far ahead of the curve, because I believe that most publishers don't get it, right? And maybe it's hard for some readers too to get it, because I think you're doing such crazy, wacky shit. And that, to me, is what makes them great. But that also means that if you're submitting to a Tor, or like at the time Leisure was the big horror publisher, right? They're probably not going to get it. Right?
No, well, they want, and I completely sympathize and empathize with their position. They're in the marketplace, and and thing needs to be what it says it is. And I've recognized this from, like, trying to vend prose books at a comic book convention. People, even people who consider themselves very free thinking, broad-minded, I'm open to whatever kinds of things, they still look for tunnels. They still look for a thing to represent and to be what it represents itself as. And my stuff tends to be very devious. Perfect Union was my attempt to write something that was as good as I could get to, or as close as I could get to doing a thing that does what it says on the can. After, at the World Horror Convention in New York City, I had put out Radiant Dawn and Ravenous Dusk, and I had started going to conventions and trying to self-identify as a horror author. Although Radiant Dawn and Ravenous Dusk were at most 10% just pure horror, very much all over
fiction, really.
Yeah, way more towards science fiction, and yet most science fiction wasn't, at that time, wasn't up for action, suspense stuff and near future stuff. It's even very, very open-minded, broad thinking, giant galaxy brain sci-fi fans wanted to do what it says on the box. And I originally pitched Un-America to some New York editors after World Horror in New York in 2005, and the responses were so discouraging. I got a couple of notes that just went, okay, sidebar, drugs are not the way, son. They're gonna destroy you. Because my book involved the question of drugs, because I don't know if you knew, but drugs are kind of popular. because we can't control the way that we feel, and we want to. And so it wasn't that I was taking drugs and writing books and just going, okay, good, that drug wrote a book for me. But it was a book that engages with the question of, why do the people in the most comfortable, affluent society in the world need to fuck their brains so hard? Well, there's a lot of reasons, and in engaging with that, I realized how easy it was to miss the point, and to go, okay, well, yeah, this is a stoner book or whatever. Yeah, stoners can't read. Yeah, I mean, look at The Hobbit. But like, as a result of that, I shelved on America for almost 10 years. And I said, okay, what can I write that's actually a horror novel that looks and feels like a horror novel? And Perfect Union is about some clueless, disposable young people who go into the woods and bad things happen, which you know, I was trying to write something that would fit on a cocktail napkin synopsis, and yet, of course, me being me, would trick people into absorbing a lot more. And so Perfect Union is probably I not trying, at least trying to be just a horror novel.
Yeah.
But it questions, not just the fear that something's going to come out of the dark and get you. It's also just the fear that who you are is not enough, the fear that you need to conform and become something else, and that thing won't be you, and that the act of submitting to that will be a greater submission and failure than death. And so, yeah, it's probably a little bit more intellectual than your average bad guys in the woods kind of horror novel. And it does deal with the question of politics, but only insofar as, how politics is a reflection of who you are and what you think the world should be, and what you'd be willing to extend to somebody without any obvious benefit. But it wasn't any more, political than, I mean, the horror of going camping with libertarians. Uh, uh,
Well, and
yeah,
I have made light of this, but famously, like I every time I talk about this book, I talk about the very first time I asked you what you were working on when you were writing it, and you said, "I'm writing a haunted house novel with bees that turn you into communists." And I know you were joking ish, but the first thing that came to my mind was, "Holy shit, I have to read that!" Right? And
right.
and you were kind of sort of, and there's ways to jokingly you know flippantly answer lots of really great novels, but I personally have, that never left my mind, and it was several years before it actually came out. And when I finally got to read it, I thought to myself, I don't know if this book could live up to what my imagination was trying to conjure for all those years, knowing you and knowing that you were working on it, and it beat all my expectations. And I think it's one of the best horror novels I've ever read. I think it's entirely super underrated for that reason. And so I just want to put it out there. It's recently been reissued. So can you tell the folks, like, where
Yeah.
they can find it?
You can find out from Ghoulish Press, these wonderful folks down in San Antonio, Texas, who essentially resurrected it. I mean, so much new stuff is constantly being made and comes out every year, that getting somebody to take the leap of faith to reissue something is a huge it's a huge leap of faith, and it's an act of love. And they did a great job, because the original presentation, I think, of the book, probably as much as I love Alan Clark's art,
Mm.
and I hounded Alan to do a cover for the book, and Carlton Mellick did the cover design. If you look at the front of that book, you don't really know what you're getting. You're probably getting some sort of a weird surrealist political thing, but yeah, to great taste,
I,
don't. go to
I actually love the color cover, but I'm a Ellen Clark stan. So
yeah, as am I, and I
yeah,
loved it, and I and I blame you, the readers, for failing Alan, not Alan for failing us.
yeah,
But it didn't vibe like a horror novel, and I
no,
pitched this
sure.
book to Leisure, and Leisure and Don DiMassa, bless his heart, passed on it, and he said it's a little too intellectual. He said to me with the caveat, I'm not saying our readers are idiots, but this is a little bit brainy, and which made me I that was the criticism that hurt me more than if somebody said my work was shit. And there's a review of this book up on Amazon that says it's pornography, pure and simple. Boy, I wish, because if it was pornography, pure and simple, I'd be living in my own home. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's funny, and it's and the how the intensity of subjectivity, and the question of how warped and how small of a mirror somebody who responds really negatively of your work is seeing it through, is it can be an almost an opiate that indemnifies you against the pain of having to accept criticism. But I humbly submit that a lot of the folks who did read my work kind of missed the point, and I don't blame them, because maybe it was a point that wasn't even in their vocabulary.
Well,
And
and I
and
think
so
it's okay for I think, for example, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is an example of a lot of people don't get a lot of the points that book's making. That book's making tons of different points, right? But
right,
that doesn't make it any less of a good book if, you know, I say to somebody like, "Oh, that book's about is partially about animal rights," and then somebody else says, "Well, I didn't get animal rights from that at all." Well, that doesn't mean that it's wrong, but if they enjoyed it but didn't get that, or if they didn't
I don't know
understand,
if that was the point, if that was the point that they were leaning into, that even marketers were leaning into. You could make that a very, very, very cogent case of what would animals mean to us if we didn't
yeah.
have them
Well,
anymore, if
I'm
we
just
had to
using it as an
make them.
example, but we could use your work too, which is that if people don't understand what the points you're trying to make about collectivism and kind of like you're making statements about Marxist ideology and communalism in perfect union, but you don't have to understand that point to have a good time reading it. It can go
That was
completely over your head, and that's fine. And that's my point, is because I think a lot of Philip K. Dick, for example, goes over people's heads, and
Mhm.
or Lovecraft for that matter. A lot of the cosmic horror goes over people's heads. They don't understand like the sheer fear of existence that man had,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
And you can still enjoy it. Now,
but it can still just be a Godzilla for you. But yeah, he was more concerned with a metaphorical Godzilla. But
right, right. So I just wanted to put that out there that I think Perfect Union is a work of genius. I personally feel On America is probably your best novel.
yeah,
Um, uh, Not necessarily. I mean, I probably had more fun reading Rainbow Shark, but um,
I had the most fun writing it.
yeah, and we'll get to Vertical, which I think is incredibly solid piece of work. So in some ways, you could say that that might be one of the tightest novels you've ever written, and we'll talk about that because that's what we're here to talk about. But really quickly, I'd like to give a chance for you to shout out your what you're doing every Thursday night,
Sure.
and tell people what's going on there with your radio show.
Well, like the CEO of Goldman Sachs, I secretly hunger for the grooves. And so I have a shadow career as a DJ. I have a weekly radio program called Bionic Exotica, which airs in San Diego on KNSJ at 89.1 FM and knsj.org. And it is an outlet for me to explore explore it's an oversimplification to just say world music, but using the metaphor of 50s 50s and 60s lounge exotica music, and the kind of anthropologically suspect notion of the cargo cult as a way to do a different kind of world music program, a program that instead of just going, all the way up the silo into these indigenous musical traditions. I love looking at syncretic fusions of weird things. I love Mongolian death metal and psychedelic cumbia and Arabic dubstep, and so these cultural exchanges between indigenous musical traditions that seem to, in and of themselves, be a transmission from a better world where all cultural traditions are equally respected, and everybody is sharing, and there's not an uphill and a downhill economically and culturally. And it's a wonderful outlet, and it's a beautiful. I mean, I compose, very very half-assed compose and play music myself, because it's a wonderful palate cleanser from writing, because writing is something that everybody thinks they know and thinks they understand, and so the experimentation is a lot more esoteric or arcane. For me, I'm not a classically composed or classically trained musician, but I'm just an avid music lover, and so everything is experimentation if you don't know what you're doing. And with the radio show that I'm doing, it's a wonderful opportunity to massage a completely different region of my brain, which is worn down to just calluses and bong water by the time I'm done writing a big project. And so it kind of recharges those batteries. And doing a radio show for an all community, or community driven, all volunteer radio station, that broadcasts liberal activist news and talk, national and local, all day, and then does this freak power free form music stuff at night. It's culmination of a dream as fundamental as writing, to just be that voice in the dark who inspires and brings magic, and maybe the soundtrack for somebody else writing. Because when I make a mix for a show, what I'm aiming for is that brainy, weird fuck up kid like myself, who's out there, scrolling through the band waves on FM, or looking through sites and just looking for that music that provides a soundtrack and a score for their own imaginative journey, what Clint Ruin used to call brain movies.
Yeah, and I put it on. I remember Thursday night I was editing um, People's Park, my novel that's coming out in a couple months, and I was doing an editing pass, and it was really, for me, it was really good background, and like for work too. So it was really good because at that night you had like a lot of electronica stuff going on, and it worked really well because I for people to know, I mostly listen to punk and metal most of the time. So I do, when I'm writing, I do listen to some soundtracks, but I thought it was a really good mixture, and I really really enjoyed it. Now, can people find episodes of the show archived on the website,
You
or?
go to knsj.org and you click on my show. There's an archive. They keep the last 2 weeks. I've
Yeah.
been I previous to this, when I shortly after the pandemic, I used to do the Bionic Exotica show at Freeform Portland.
Yeah.
Also an excellent community-driven, all-volunteer, all-music station. And I was still doing it after I lived down here, and just,
Yeah.
zapping it up there remotely, um, and then uploading it to Mixcloud.
Yeah.
So if folks go to mixcloud.com and look for Bionic Exotica, they can find an archive of the shows from that era. Mixcloud, very sensibly, for people who, who like money,
Mm.
monetize the site so that you have to have, so if you're not paying, they'll only keep 10 of your shows up.
Yeah.
So I've been bulking at uploading the new shows. Long story short, you can find the old ones on there, and if somebody donates to knsj.org in the near future, maybe we can afford to upload all the shows there too. But you can find the previous 2 episodes through the website, and they're groovy.
Yeah. I will, now that I know that, I will be doing that today. So um let me okay, lost my notes there, Cody. All right, now they're back. Okay, so before I wanted to get into Vertical, and I should say this, that I haven't done my top reads of the year list yet. I have a rough version of it, but I know Vertical is in my top 10. So
Oh,
and Vertical is what I want the listeners to know, is that I highly recommend that you take my word for it and buy Vertical, which if it's, you should be asking for it in any bookstore that you regularly shop at. And if they don't have it, they should be able to get it. Of course, you can order it on Amazon if you want to do that. Um,
or from one of our local retailers that have signed copies like Verbatim Books or Artifact Books of Encinitas.
There you go. That's a great example too. And so here's the thing. Yeah, you can order a signed copy from Verbatim or Artifact.
Artifact. Yeah.
Yeah, and Artifact, we had an amazing event at Artifact for Vertical, Suborbital 7, John Shirley's book, the same publisher, and The Last Night to Kill Nazis. We had a great event at Vertical, or at Vertical, at Artifact. So we definitely want to send people there, and shout out to Greg. But the thing, I want people to take my word for this and buy this book and come back, because I think this will be a really kind of under the hood discussion of the book. But in this first bit, we're going to assume that people have not necessarily read it. We'll give a spoiler warning, and then we'll do a little bit more nuts and bolts. But if you absolutely want to stay completely unspoiled and you trust me, pause this and come back after you have read Vertical. But for now, we're going to assume that you might still be on the edge, and or we're gonna try to talk you into it by talking about it. Now, this is a very different book for you because it's a little more straightforward, and it's, I wouldn't say that it's not Gonzo, and in that it's still a Cody Goodfellow book in many ways. And I don't like to use the word restrained, but I think the feeling that I want people to understand is that it seems like you were going for a bit more of a mainstream thriller feel by writing Vertical. Am I correct on that?
Absolutely. Have you seen the Meg 2 Trench?
I have not seen that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm not gonna try to put that on you or convince you to, but it was directed by Ben Wheatley.
Mm-hmm.
He
He's
of
done some good stuff. Yeah.
List. High
Yeah.
Rise. Have you seen High Rise?
High Rise was amazing. Yeah.
Breathtaking masterpiece. Shouldn't be a guy who needs to like make a corporate for hire job to get out of movie jail.
Yeah. And it's a J.G. Ballard novel. Like, amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, Ben Wheatley made the Meg 2 Trench with
Yeah.
Jason Statham and some Chinese guy, because he got marketing synergy going there. And it's the most corporate movie. It seems like an AI generated screenplay. But I don't know that I really ever saw a moment of, oh wow, this is a Ben Wheatley film. That's very strange. There were some very weird, backhanded, surrealistic spikes about capitalism or what have you. But yeah, I guess if one wanted to say in hindsight, looking at my career, if it ended today, which it might, uh, that yeah, Vertical is kind of my Meg too, in that it was not a scenario that I generated. It's a novelization of a screenplay that was not produced.
Mm.
And so the more than just the pitch, but the entire outline and everything were presented to me for development. And so in this, the challenge, as opposed to just getting up and putting on a pair of pants and getting the story told, was in trying to make it my own thing, because they had a presentation for a very solid, very, very straightforward, mainstream action thriller. And so sure, I'm trying to strike a balance, put my voice in it without completely derailing the whole train.
And this was Alcon Entertainment, who
Titan, yes.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people, this story might sound familiar to some of the listeners of this podcast, because a couple months ago we
talking to John.
We talked to John Shirley about Suborbital 7, which was a part of the same basic process. And
I wish I was a guy who liked homework and I'd reviewed that first so I could find out what wouldn't get us sued. But the thing is, yes, they came to John with this premise, and similarly they came to me with a premise and said, okay, see what you can do with this. And it was a fantastic challenge. I don't want to make this sound like it was, like I was just, flipping the Big Macs doing this, because I got to work with one of, if not my favorite editors of all time, Jeff Connor, who owns, I mean, if you love indie small press horror, he's one of those guys. He's like a Zelig. He ran I want to say, is it Screen Press? But it's because of Jeff Connor that I first came to know John Shirley's work, because of Heat,
yeah,
which he put out back in the day, and so I was working with this premise that feels very much like a USA Up All Night action picture, B action picture, and developing it into a novel. And we had long conversations about what is a novel do. I mean, it shouldn't just feel like a treatment for an action movie that didn't get shot,
right.
And
well one thing I will say, as a longtime reader of your work, is that I wouldn't have known that you didn't originate the concept. There's enough of Cody Goodfellow on the pages in certain subtle ways. I may have had the thought, wow, this is a really restrained concept for Cody, but the finished work, like, I wouldn't have assumed that you didn't originate the idea if I just picked it up and read it, right, and didn't know that.
I think I could have. I mean, if you don't think I can get my stink all over something, you've clearly never used a bathroom after me. But the thing is, we worked on this concept, which is about, I mean, if to briefly summarize, it's about a group of urbex and parkour explorers, who go to who have kind of broken up, as a lot of bands do, because of conflicting ideals and things. They reunite to go out to Moscow to summit this new, but as of yet incomplete, skyscraper that's going to be the new world's tallest building. And
which right there, that crew and their kind of thing, like, that is a kind of an edge and detail that feels like a Cody Goodfellow novel, right? Like, because those characters give you a point to subtly make some, not necessarily political, but like sociological observations in the in the context of the story, right?
Yeah, and this is the kind of thing that I really leaned into and really bit down on, and let's figure out this is the place where there's the most space for, because it seems like, I mean, there's lots of action thrillers wherein an American gets in trouble abroad and they have to be rescued. And that was the kind of thing that it felt like the sort of thing that's de rigueur, it's taken for granted, that I really wanted to unpack and attack, because it really cuts to the heart of why are we so much more special than
Right.
any other human beings. And so we go off abroad and reap the consequences of our own actions, and we deserve to be delivered by a Chuck Norris or a Sylvester Stallone simply by dint of our passports.
Mm-hmm.
And interrogating that a little bit was yeah, my working within this framework to try to kind of, put a spoonful of medicine into that teaspoon of sugar.
It seems like what Alcon is also wanting you guys to do is to kind of, put the IP out there in the world, the intellectual property, while also showing the concept of the story and fleshing it out. So like potential investors in a film can like see it as a physical item. But that gives
Mhm.
you the chance to really like flesh out the story in a way that a screenplay never could, right? And
Right. It's yeah, no, and that's where there was the room for growth, and where I had the room to put my own stink on this. And that's what a book can do. I
yeah,
mean, that movies and games and every other form of entertainment that does 97% of the work for you can't do.
yeah,
And that's the tricky and ineffable and maddening part about literature in this age, right? There's so many
yeah.
other bright flashing lights with all the bells and whistles looking to distract you. If people come to a book, what are they looking for? Are they looking for just a book that couldn't justify the $200 million in financing to become a movie? Or are they looking for something that does what no movie 200, 500, $1 billion couldn't do?
Yeah.
And so trying to into working to re-inject that and discover those ways of touching people's nerves, touching those nodes, those synapses that make people really fucking come alive and respond to a thing and go, this feels like life, or what life should be, or what I'm afraid life could be. That all these other much more immersive, much more interactive, much more they're doing the work for you kinds of entertainment leave us short. And so it with vertical, and I know John faced a lot of these challenges with suborbital, but John's an old campaigner. I mean, even more than if I was going to look for a synthesis of Philip K. Dick and Lovecraft, and yet more than both of them put together, I'd say, yeah, our brother John Shirley is the guy, because
There's a
uh
reason I got more than 50 of his books back there on the shelf, right? Yeah.
he's yeah, no,
Yeah.
he's
Well, and one
still
thing,
doing
and
it.
I'm yeah, yeah, we both think John's a genius, but that goes without saying. But one of the things, if you look at the back cover of this, that highlights something that is underrated in your oeuvre, that and Dr. Professor D. Harlan Wilson will be very excited that I started using oeuvre because it's his fault. um and but in your oeuvre,
You stop saying oeuvre.
yeah, well, because he says oeuvre and
Oh
says
yeah.
oeuvre, and because of
Oh
him,
shit. Note to self.
yeah, because of co-hosting Dickheads now with Professor Wilson, I've started saying oeuvre, and I don't mean to, and it's his fault. But in your oeuvre,
Right.
Cody,
Right.
which I feel I am uniquely qualified to talk about because I feel like I have the majority of your work on my shelf.
Okay.
Not all of it, but a good portion of it.
Mhm.
Your characters are dynamic and full of life and very realistic. Now, people mostly will remember you for the weird shit that happens in the books, but one of the things that I noticed is that the description in the back cover of Vertical starts with 3 characters,
Yeah.
and Michael Forster, Cam Buckley, and Maddie Acosta are very crucial to this book. And I think Michael in particular, who's our main point of view character, if you didn't give a shit about these 3 characters, or if you could not get into these 3 characters, then this book is not going to be suspenseful. But I found it suspenseful because I was into these characters and because I was very interested in what happened with them. Michael, being this kind of ex political prankster guy, became curious and interesting to me. And I think you put a lot of work into these 3 characters, into making them feel more realistic. Did you write backstories, biographies? How did you make these characters so alive on the page?
Well, I mean, they were I mean, they were kind of shorthand in the original screenplay, obviously, because and this is where like visual cues and things come so much into play. And in developing the 3 main characters and giving them some backstory, yeah, I did write quite a lot that didn't end up on the page, so that you so that you feel like they know that they had a life before this story, and they hope to have a life after this story. And so to give them dimension, yeah, I did work out quite a lot of backstory that didn't end up in the book, some which didn't quite make the final cut for the book, and yet I think the book is better for it, because you have the sense of the authority of who these people were and who they who they hope to be. They're not just kind of sock puppets traveling through a meat grinder. And I think I mean, I don't know if it's beneficial to a writer to like write like their turn-ons and pet peeves and everything else as a way of adding dimension. But I mean, one of the weirdest and biggest discussions, or most, at least with the most exchanges, conversations that I had with Jeff in the 11th hour before of the editing process, and one of the reasons, and the reason I love Jeff, it's certainly not his personality, is his rigor as an editor. In that we went through this thing, and I like, it's done, right? And then we went through it again, and then we went through it again, and you really see the difference between what a commercial or corporate publishing experience should be versus an indie experience. Was usually, it's like getting invited to a house party. Yeah, I like your outfit, come on in, and let your freak flag fly. And if you take a crap on the keg, then it's all good. But the rigor was not born out of a corporate thing. It was born out of this sense of wanting to make the book the best book that it could be, and somebody's actually paying for that to happen. And so that was fantastic. But like, one of the biggest conversations that we had was over this moment that was just a throwaway moment in one of the first chapters, introducing Michael Foster, who's kind of the primary of the triad of main characters in the book. And it was a question of what's he listen to on his iPod after he comes out of his workout. And we went back and forth and back and forth. And Jeff is not like a corporate elevator music guy. He was at the last Sex Pistols show, in San Francisco.
It's funny, John mentioned that to me,
right,
and tried to get Jeff and I to talk about that in LA when we were all hanging out. So yeah,
Oh, really?
yeah.
And he wouldn't, or he
He
was
kind of
like,
is like, yeah,
ah,
yeah,
yeah, I love Jeff. But yeah, but like we were looking at, like, and it really hit home how strong of a signifier this can be.
yeah,
And it can be, I'm sure, if you're looking at somebody at the gym, and you're kind of speculating on maybe trying to start a conversation with them or something. Yeah, what you see them listening to when you're working out may or may not tell you, yeah, this is a person I might want to spend the rest of my life with, versus this is a person I don't want to even have an exchange with.
yeah.
Um, and we
It's
went
interesting. Yeah,
and back and forth a lot about this question of, what is this guy listening to, and what does this tell you? And it speaks to, how far from the list of those who go against the wall when I'm in charge in the revolution, Jeff will be. I think what we went with in the end was Negative Land. That
yeah,
yeah, he's listening to Negative Land, because I figured we went back and forth, and was like, oh, this is too strong of a, aggro rah rah rah, but it's juvenile statement, or this or that. But Negative Land, whom I mean, I have bands whom I listen to and enjoy more, but I don't think there's a band that everybody should listen to more than Negative Land, because I don't think there's anybody with a burning message that everybody needs to fucking hear in this stage of terminal capitalism more than Negative Land's message. But that kind of a little moment that we had the time to debate over and figure out really made me think, and I think made me grow a little bit as a writer. I mean, in a book you have a little bit more time versus a movie, whereas in a movie, they'll put 20 pages of character development into the choice of what band the main character's shirt is.
yeah.
uh you know and and so those things can tell people a lot, and so yeah, ideally should be sweating them a lot. But like I felt like, I mean, if I didn't before, I felt like I was in good hands when I was like, how about Negative Land? And he was like, yeah, okay, yeah, that's
Well,
good.
what's is funny, the worst example of that I've ever seen is the Vin Diesel movie Triple X.
Yeah,
When like two of the characters like quote um the Vandals Anarchy Burger like it's a serious song, and
right,
like, and all that would tell me is that these guys don't realize that the song is a fucking joke.
yeah,
And that just made me go, these guys are fucking idiots if they thought the Vandals were writing a serious song.
right,
Right.
right. Well, there's so much. I mean, there's so I mean, there's no end of
Yeah.
very talented people who have actually put in the time into the craft. Yeah, there's tens of millions of yahoos and ham and eggers who have not,
Yeah.
and
Well,
well, they're adding empty calories. There's a lot of people who can write a solid, credible story, but the difference between something that you like and go, that checked all the dots or checked all the boxes, versus something that you love, it's the difference between, Rebel Moon and Rogue One, I guess. But it's
well,
but
and so when you're doing this too, like a lot of your research is going to end up being on the setting in the Corva. Am I saying it right? The Corva Tower.
yeah,
Yeah, and this in the novel, these Urban X, you know, pranksters, and you could get the wrong idea by looking at the cover that they're actually scaling the outside of the building, but basically they're trying to get to the top of this still yet unfinished in work in progress world's tallest building in Moscow
yeah,
on Russia Day. And so the setting and the timing, there's so much involved in researching and you're going to have to know how they traveled across Moscow. You're going
yes,
to have to know like a lot of things about skyscraper production and construction.
Yeah.
And so when I'm reading this, I'm seeing the level of research that you're doing, and I really appreciated that. Um, but here's the thing, like you're putting these characters in this situation, so these are all things to make the novel feel very real. And so by the time that the Les Furies are are climbing the tower, I think it's a very well like thought out, and I'm saying the reader is going to feel like they're really there, which is a
Oh,
magic trick because you obviously didn't probably have the money to go on a trip to Moscow.
well, yeah. When I was writing this, it was actually leading into and during the lockdown.
Yeah.
So yeah, nobody was going anywhere. And I have always considered one of the most satisfying challenges of writing is to create the illusion for the reader that you're luring them into this place that they've never been, but they feel like they're there. Well, yeah, shocker, you've never been there either.
Yeah.
And so that's yeah, that as much as anything else about this is why we keep doing it, right? Is to be
Yeah.
able to weave that illusion of another place that this other person's been to, but you haven't been to either. And I tried to be scrupulous in not misrepresenting anything, because I mean, as a San Diegan, I mean, I bristle when I watch, when I watch with the second Jurassic Park movie, and it ends with it's supposedly in San Diego. I'm like, those are RTD buses. That's Los Angeles's buses, not ours. This whole
Right.
thing's bullshit. Dinosaurs don't exist. Go to hell. You know,
My absolute favorite San Diego version of that is Terriers, which makes OB out to be this thriving metropolis that has its own police department.
right. Or well, I mean, it became a joke in Anchorman. Because like
Yeah.
when they killed, yeah, when they're like Anchorman was supposed to be set in San Diego, and then I think they moved it to Portland. But like
No, well, the first one was all in San Diego. I know that, but yeah.
yeah, but and then they show like the convention center,
Yeah.
and it goes San Diego, 1978.
Right.
Right, and it's yeah. You're not
No,
Ted.
and this feels very Russian, and it feels like, at least to me, like, somebody who has not been there, but I have recommended to I have a friend who worked crew for Olympics coverage when the Olympics were in Russia, and I did
Right.
recommend this book to her, and she didn't yell bullshit at me. So
Well, that's
I didn't
well,
didn't get that reaction.
cited that one Russian guy who came to the book signing at Mysterious Galaxy and was like, when I wrote this, I wasn't sure. I kind of was hoping that Putin would be dead. And he was like, "You wish."
Yeah. And
But yeah, I I did marinate in the location and try to present not just the sights and sounds and smells, but the feeling of how it would feel to be there, and how the people who live there feel in it, and how they would present it to you. And
yeah.
so yeah, and so that was a very simple thing. And at the time I was writing it, the lockdown's happening. Yeah, it's brought into really sharp relief how much literature and entertainment can take you to those places that you can't go to, or will never go to. And so escape became so very important. And it was a you know it was the message. It was an escape for me to write it, as much
Yeah.
as I was hoping it would be an escape for the readers to read it.
Well, yeah, and as somebody who's a longtime reader of your work, I found, like I said, I wouldn't have not believed it was a Cody Goodfellow novel, or original idea, and it has a very and I was lucky because Carrie and I went on a trip to Ojai, and I read Vertical on the surf liner on the way back from Ojai. So I read the first like 200 pages in basically one sitting. And so I was very lucky to read it that way. And
That's I had hoped that this book would have come out before summer in travel, because I was, when I asked myself, what is my reader doing?
Yeah.
I kind of thought they're reading this thing and trying to will themselves into it while they're watching with one eye to see if the restroom is open on the air on that long flight
Yeah. Well,
to,
and I had a real perfect reading experience with this book because of that, because I was, I think I read at least 2/3 of the book in that one sitting on the train. Well, between the bus going from Ojai to Ventura to catch the train, and then the train to San Diego, and the bus back to OB. So
that's what I hope. If you've got a 6 hour or longer plane or bus journey, you have no reason not to.
yeah, no, and I would say this is a perfect read for that kind of traveling situation, because it's not so brainy that you have to, like, you know, you can kind of half sort of pay attention to parts of it, and still catch, most
Please
of
only
it.
have pay attention to substantial portions of it.
Well, no, and I mean
Yeah,
that in a
I
in a
know,
good way, that it's a
dude. I
page
know.
turner. And
I know. Yeah, no, it engages a good portion of your brain, but I don't want it to be one of those things that, like a William Gibson or a Tim Powers book, where every few pages you're stopping and going, wait,
wait
my
a second, yeah,
growing some new synapses to actually
that's a perfect
cogitate and
example,
comprehend
Willie.
what
That's a
I
perfect
read.
example of what I was trying to say. It's not like is a William Gibson book, for example. Like, you definitely have moments where you're like, am I catching this? Am I getting all of this? And I'm a pretty astute reader, and if I still feel that way, um, and
Uh-huh.
that's the thing, is I would say that On America of your work is one that might require a little bit more attention. Or even Radiant Dawn, which I think is a pretty propulsive book, has some levels where you might be thinking like, oh, did I catch everything?
I get a
Uh,
little didactic in those. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well,
And
and
this one I
and
was kind of, trying to just, let's just swim. I felt like
and that's not I'm not picking on the books that way. I'm saying it's a good thing. But what I'm
yeah.
saying about this one is that it's a very good, propulsive, entertaining
Hmm.
trip read. It's perfect. And I say it that way. The pros is there's the review. I know I highlighted this in my review, but the reveal of the Corva Tower the first time they see it is beautifully written. There's
Oh,
moments like that. One of the things that I think makes it a Cody Goodfellow book, as a prime example that I can give you that it's still a Cody Goodfellow book, even if you didn't come up with a concept, is, for example, you have the Urban X crew. Like, there's a scene where they're talking about one of their pranks that is basically a reference to the Iliad, right? A very deep cut literal reference. And
yes.
then you also have a former punk rock Russian cop who used to be in a band, The Great Train Robbery, and talking about how they used to press their records on old X-rays.
That's X-rays. That's a legendary thing, going back to like the Beatles era, actually.
Yeah.
And yeah, there was my editor kind of rightly questioned, is this time outright? And but that was such a beautiful bit of detail that, even though it wasn't completely canon chronologically, I felt like that, as much as anything else, that that I felt like that was that telling bit of strange that would tell you how badly these people want to have express themselves, express things that the state refuses, and that genius for repurposing things, taking whatever's around in order to make it into something, felt like the best way to explain to you who this character was and where he was coming from and where this scene was coming from and what built his ideals that he now feels he's on the verge of completely betraying.
Right.
So yeah,
So,
yeah, no,
so I think we've done a pretty good
that's where
job.
research comes out, though, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Re-
And that's what I'm saying is these are the elements that make it a Cody Goodfellow book in many ways. And, like, for example, now I heard you talk about that X-ray thing at the Mysterious Galaxy event, and so I knew that was a thing. However, if I was reading this book and had not had that discussion with you, I still would have clued into that, and
Mm-hmm.
that cop character as being a
Right.
very Cody Goodfellow character, and it would have been something that I think I would have identified as something that's very your work.
Well,
So
yeah. Well, the silly the subplot actually with the cop, I did create, and that character I did create out of whole
yeah.
cloth. And his whole thing with, yeah, he's trying to quit smoking and his wife's making him drink the shitty tea and stuff. And yeah, no, all of that was original to me. And that was, yeah, the cop is me. Everybody else is in somebody else's book, and my guy, and yeah, the guy who's me is basically chasing them, trying to catch up with the story. Yeah, that's me.
Um,
Or Vasily.
okay, so
Yeah.
I think we've done a pretty good job of selling this book. So if people have not already like been convinced on Vertical, I don't know what to tell you.
Common thieves. All right, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
let's do a spoiler warning, and now we're just not gonna. And it's funny because even though I made the spoiler warning, John refused to give away one element of Suborbital 7,
Wow.
and like and even like when I started to ask questions about it, he went, and I
Did
was
he
like, no,
blame you? Where are the other six?
no. Yeah. And it's funny because he was very worried about this. So you can feel free to not give away any elements of it, but I want to assume at this point that this is a point where if you haven't read it, pause, come back. And if you're one of the
Yeah,
people who have read this book, then lock in a little bit. We're going to get under the hood a little bit. Um,
sure.
so one of the things about like the way the final act kind of worked out for me is that I found it very white knuckling because for one thing, you killed off characters that I didn't expect you to kill off at the time that you did, and you put everybody in serious peril, and basically all the characters uh, like you weren't really worried about having them stick around for a sequel.
Right.
And so there's a couple of things that I want to talk to you about with that, because I think that I really glammed onto first of all, one of my biggest fears is isolation. So the isolation that they felt once they were up there and realizing that this is not a functioning building and we're kind of stuck there.
Nobody's coming to save you. In fact, the people, if anybody finds out you're there,
Yeah.
the last thing they're gonna do is try to help you. Yeah.
And so you did a really good job of building that feeling. And so but one of the things that is a really subtle part of the book was the earthquake.
Hmm.
And not subtle, but I mean saying like an important thing that
Right.
is definitely a big spoiler.
Right.
So Moscow doesn't really have earthquakes, so you came
Nope.
up with a very good reason for why they would,
Hmm.
uh,
Hmm.
which is fracking, and it is a realistic thing. Was this a part of the screenplay, or was this something you added for suspense?
There was an earthquake in the screenplay. It gave no background into where it came from or what happened. And so yeah, then as big a challenge logistically as anything else in the book was the question of how do you justify an earthquake happening in the middle of a tectonic plate that's 7 time zones wide.
Right.
uh and so, but yeah, in looking into it, it got into the question of fracking, which has I think arguably destabilized a lot of tectonic plates, and has become a major factor of the Anthropocene. And then uh you know people's hunger for myths. Dyatlov Pass is kind of like a Bermuda Triangle for Eurasia. It's a place where there have been phenomenal events, and so it kind of knocks predictable science into a cocked hat. And so it was, and so locating the epicenter in Dyatlov Pass kind of satisfied a bare yeah, and yes, they are fracking there. Satisfied a bare logistical, but it also satisfied or scratched that itch of the id, what's going on that they don't want us to know about, kind of thing. And Dyatlov Pass is kind of a heritage locale for that. And yeah, if there's anything about the book that I feel like kind of, I mean, well, it's, I mean, an earthquake.
Yeah.
It's next to an act of God. It's really hard to, I mean, you can say, and then an earthquake happens, and that's next to saying, yeah, and then an angel comes down and waves a magic wand and fixes everything. But I mean, when I took a basic screenwriting class at UCLA, and my professor Richard Walter stressed that you can have one great coincidence in your script and get away with it. If you have more than that, people might not be able to point to the reason why, but they'll hate you. You can have one magical unlikely coincidence happen, but nobody will ever point out that something feels unreasonable if it's bad. If something bad happens, you can have 16 unlikely, totally cosmically and improbable bad things happen. It's human nature to accept that. I mean, that's it, and it's funny that it's what we come to film to get away from. But any sort of film, even escapist entertainment, if there's these rules by which we expect disaster to strike, and if no matter how bad you keep making things, even if it's improbably bad to where you're just smacking your puppets on your Punch and Judy stage, nobody will ever say you're being needlessly cruel. That's improbable. I'm out of here. And so, yeah, the earthquake, which was a thing that was in the screenplay, and did not have an originating cause. That's one of those examples of something that, yeah, in a more Cody Goodfellow book, I probably would have delved more into. But it was like, and then an earthquake happens, and the building's fucked; it's falling over.
Mm.
And so it was a challenge, but also kind of a delight to be freed from having to go, well, why though? Well, why though? What caused that? What caused the thing that caused that? What caused the thing that caused the thing that caused that? Because that's the way my brain works. And I don't know. I mean, clearly, I don't have I'm not taking the pulse of the generation.
Um, I'm sorry, Cody. I just got a text that I have to deal with, which
Okay.
um
You want
a
to
long story, and I say this to the listeners too because I'm cutting off an interview when I would normally keep going, but
dude,
I have a dog vet issue. But
all right.
uh the thing about this book that I really want to stress to people is that in the third act, the tension and the things that go on really made me nervous for the characters, and it really worked. And I think that you know that whole you have to care to scare kind of thing is very important, and I cared about the characters, and I think that's one of the reasons why it worked, but also because the setting felt very real. And so I want to give you kudos for all the excellent research that you did for this book.
Thanks, bro.
And I'm sorry, folks. I just have to, in real time, deal with an emergency.
Go take care of that dog.
Yeah, and but for anyone who made it this far, and then you're obviously a Cody fan, he'll be back around. We also have an event coming up at Verbatim Books on the 5th. So this should be out before then, but it may be close. It may have already happened. I'm not quite sure. But the event is try and encourage people to set reading goals for the new year. And I'm currently working on a worksheet that people can fill out. And the authors that are going to be there are going to help everyone like kind of come up with a reading goals for the year. So, and if Vertical's not already on it, it should be. But of course, if you got to this point, you've read it. So everybody, I really appreciate people who listen and check out Cody's work. We will I'm sure we'll be back with what's New Tomorrow is the next novel coming out.
New
Right.
Tomorrow should be out. Yeah, summer 2024 from Oddness Press.
Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to that one. And we might do some deep dives in some of the Cody's older books. And in the near future. But and Cody will probably be back for some of our panels. So I really appreciate your time, Cody. I'm sorry to cut things a little short because I don't like to have time limits.
Yeah,
Uh,
no worries.
yeah, and but Vertical is out there, so please get it and spread the word because that's really important for everyone. Where can people find you, Cody?
You can find me at codygoodfellow.com. You can go to knsj.org and look for the Bionic Exotica radio program. And yeah, that's about it.
Yeah. All right. And I'll see you at Verbatim on January 5th. And folks, please consider making a little tip or donation at the Buy Me a Coffee app and help me get research books and not get yelled at for spending money on that stuff. Hopefully, we'll see you again soon, Cody. Thanks for joining us.